Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. A warm welcome to our returning listeners from Australia and India. England do not make it 6 from 6 this summer at the Kia Oval. In the end, they were on the receiving end of a fairly spectacular trouncing. Sri Lanka win it by 8 wickets. Pathum Nissanka scoring a breathtaking fourth innings 100 that will live long in the memory. We will celebrate a special win for Sri Lanka and wonder what it all means for England. Are they too casual? Did they get a couple of the selections wrong? And don't worry, we'll squeeze in some bad light chat in for you as well. I'm Rana, and with me today are Ben Gardner and Katya Witney. Joining us later in the show is Mark Butcher. A bit of podmin for you before we start. Given how much cricket there is at the moment, we're going to do you a bonus episode later this week. So today we're just going to focus on the test, and later in the week we'll hit you with everything county championship related in England, white ball related too.
So we're saving Michael Goff going for a wee for Friday, are we?
Okay, tell us about Michael Goff going for a wee.
Oh, just that, Durham's assistant coach Alan Walker stood in for an over because Michael Goff, one of the best umpires in the game, storied international match official, had to go for a wee 14 overs into Lancashire's game against Durham. You can, if you catch it just right on the live stream, you can see him running off the pitch and then comes back on with a bit less haste because he looks a bit more at ease with himself at the end of the over. So
cool. Other than that, only the test match today. Katya, how special was that for Sri Lanka, winning a test match in England with an all-seam attack against an England side that has, to their credit, a pretty good home record under the current regime? That was just their fourth home defeat under Stokes and McCullum.
Yeah, really special. I mean, especially after Lords and Old Trafford, it was a bit downhearting. I mean, when you look back at it, they did, like, Sri Lanka did come back in all of the test matches at Lords. They were in it for a while, and on the final innings at Old Trafford, there was a definite possibility that they were going to pull a surprise over England. But here it was again, having for the first 3 days, Sri Lanka's team attack really weren't very good on day one, and then bowling England out for 34 overs yesterday, and then Pathum Nissanka scoring that fourth innings century here today. That was a really special one. And with Pathum Nissanka as well, having only come back into the side after 2 years at Lords, and then score a century in the fourth innings and join a really exclusive club of overseas batters who've scored centuries in the fourth innings in England, let alone just at the Oval. That's really incredible. And when you look at Pathum Nissanka as well, his first Test 100 was one that really marked him out as a gritty batter and someone who could really stick around. Whereas here you saw him attack and strike at over 100 for the whole innings, and really making them look like they were just messing around, to be honest. And I think that'll be a really special one for Sri Lanka. At the end of a summer that's seen some pretty one-sided cricket, England have kind of been put in their place a little bit and made to think, well, you can't just take everything lightly, and you can't just assume you're going to win over these sides. Sri Lanka can definitely play, and they showed that.
Just some Nissanka stats. So that was only the 7th fourth innings 100 in England by an overseas batter in a winning cause. So Bradman and Morris at Headingley in 1948, Hunt at the Oval in 1963, Greenwich at Lords in 84, Graham Smith at Edgbaston in 2008, Shy Hope at Headingley famously in 2017. Ben, where's he been, Nissanka? This is his first couple of test appearances in more than 2 years, and it's worth saying that he's a genuine prodigy in that he averages 60 in first-class cricket, amazing first-class record. There was some chat on commentary this week talking to him as he's like, oh, he's this white ball guy they've got in. It's like, that's not really true. I know he's had a good run in ODI cricket, but this is a guy who from a very young age established himself as the most exciting young red ball batter in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think where he's been is that, if anything, him starting the series on the outside, and I think they would look back at that as a bit of a mistake now, but also just speaks to Sri Lanka having a lot of good players in that batting lineup. Another example of that is Kamindu Mendis being down at number 7. So he did start his career really well. He sort of, it's not like as if he tailed off completely. It's only his 11th test match. So he's still only in his career, but had like a poor series. And I think it was in that series where Kamindu Mendis came into the side for his debut against Australia. And so a combination of that, wanting to include Madushka, who had also started his career brilliantly. And then the other guys you think about leaving out is, Krinaratne, the captain, brilliant opener. Kusal Mendis, who, shows flashes of like being able to play actually that kind of, not that Nissanka did, that can kind of win you a test that you otherwise kind of wouldn't. You've got, Andrew Matthews, great Sri Lankan cricket, Dinesh Chandimal as well, obviously another great Sri Lankan cricket. Really, like there's actually not a lot of space for and then Daniel Silva as well, the captain, who also is very good. There's not a lot of space for a guy to come in, even though he is obviously brilliant. Actually, what I like most about him, like, because it was an attacking innings kind of, but you also have to like look at the scorecard and the strike to remind yourself of that. Like there were times where it was like, well, he's just.
He was in total control, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Total control, and England helped with extremely aggressive fields and also some not particularly accurate bowling. But I thought the control stood out for me. It was a totally brilliant innings.
Yeah, and the celebration as well was great at the 100 because he just it was like he's just made, as you said, that seventh that list is such a list of like, you know, of great innings and great, you know, wins in England. And he just, you know, it was so unfussed. He kind of just, firstly, he got the third, which was great. Yeah. That you know, you'd normally, like, maybe you'd look for the second if you hit like quite a long single, but to actually be like thinking like, no, I've got to get the third run here.
Yeah.
And then he just takes his helmet, he kind of just stands there and then puts his arms to the side, a little bit of an embrace. And again, with the winning run as well, sort of cuts it away for 4, but trots down the other end, plonks his bat in, and then just, you know, a bit of a high five with Angelo Matthews. Almost looked a bit like, I was quite enjoying batting. It's a bit of a shame that I have to stop doing that now.
Has the narrative around Sri Lanka been wrong this summer? In that there's been a lot of doom and gloom around several things that are linked, but not all the same. So there's been doom and gloom around ticket attendances, ticket prices. There's doom and gloom around the lack of cricket West Indies and Sri Lanka play. Doom and gloom about how inexperienced West Indies were in particular. But that Sri Lankan top 7, and we said it before, is really good. Mm-hmm. You know, Pathum Nissanka and Kamindu Mendes, if they were English, they'd be up there, if not surpassing, the most exciting young English batting talent. And their bowlers throughout this series showed signs that even though they were undercooked, they could really challenge England. This isn't a bad side. This is a side that just doesn't play enough Test cricket for us to really work out how good they are.
Yeah, completely. And like I said earlier, they have shown signs of getting into all 3 tests in this series. It is worth saying, I think, that England were in a dominant position in this test match, and partly through their own recklessness and partly through Sri Lanka being pretty good, they threw it away. And England were on top for most of this series. But you can absolutely see a world in which if Sri Lanka got more opportunities to play test matches, particularly overseas, I mean, thinking about like how many sides come to England who aren't Australia and India and win test matches, and Sri Lanka have done that. How many sides like England go away and lose most of their test matches, and Sri Lanka, who don't play much test cricket, have come here and won a test. So that is an incredible achievement on its own. And that's also not to kind of be the patronising, oh my God, it's really good they've won a test match. No, they've really competed and they fought to win, and they caught England not playing the kind of cricket that they could have played, that they should have played, and that they have played over this summer. And they really capitalised on that, and they took the initiative to do that, and, you know, fair play.
But I also think that actually, like, if you go back to that first test, like, not that they should have won it, but they were in that position, that third innings, where actually you could have seen, was it Mendes and Chandimal at that time putting on another 100 runs and then England being really up against it, and then England kind of blow them away with that. They break the partnership and then blow them away with that second new ball. And actually, in some ways, I think the Sri Lanka should, if they're honest with themselves, look back at that game as a bit of a missed opportunity. I mean, they had other bits of misfortune going back to it with the ball change, for example, but also they had that really bad spell on the, was it on the second morning or the third morning?
Yeah, when they didn't know what they were doing. Yeah, they didn't know who was supposed to start the day, that sort of thing.
And then, you know, I mean, they ended up coming back on it. And that was almost what it felt like happened in this game. Like, Sri Lanka started so badly that England were like, oh, okay, we're kind of playing a beer match here, so let's also sort of like not really take it too seriously and then throw all the wickets away. And all of a sudden, Sri Lanka, like, it was like they'd like, you know, pulled, like they deliberately lulled them as that kind of false sense of security, and then suddenly started playing really well, and England were like, that wasn't the deal. Like, you're not supposed to play well at this
Do you think England were complacent?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting because you look at obviously how the match panned out, and it looks like England lost it in that third innings, and they did to an extent, and you can pick out shots in that innings, I guess Duckett's in particular, but actually, like, that second morning when Sri Lanka had been so bad on day 1, England started 220 for 3.
Get up to 261 for 3.
Yeah, and the ball is, you know, 40, 50 overs old to start the day. So yeah, about 50 overs old when they at that point when Brook gets out. And Brook's innings in particular was the one where it was like, what are you doing? Like, this test is still like very much alive, and there are runs out there to be had, but just bat properly. And he just looked like he was just couldn't, almost like was like, oh, I can't really be bothered if I score runs or here or not, and I don't really mind if I get out, which is like, obviously it works for England at times, but this did feel like it crossed the line from that kind of freedom into maybe a certain amount of complacency. The other area was, I think, and it's difficult because we're going to talk about bad light later, and there was stick for everyone on the first day for them coming off when it wasn't raining, but on that second day when the umpire said it was too dark to bowl your quicks, England stayed on for too long bowling the spinners. It'd be fair enough to stay on for a couple of overs to see if there is something going on. When it was clear that Sri Lanka were playing it easily and there were runs there to be had, they gave him an extra 60 runs there, and that meant that even though they actually then bowled pretty well on that third morning,
the Josh Hull drop catch helped.
Yeah, that's
as well.
true. Yeah,
a big moment in the game.
Yeah.
But I think, rewind to that point in the game. England are 261 for 3 with Pope and Brooke in the middle. Pope has just smoked a runnable ton. Sri Lanka are just trying to bowl dry. There's nearly 30 overs left of the second new ball. And Sri Lanka, who already looked tired and off it, in the blink of an eye, England are all out. With every single person in the first innings out caught, but none of them in the slip calling. Duckett was caught behind, but that was off an attempted ramp, so I don't think that counts. But for me, what was the most damning thing in the first innings, and I know looking at the scorecard, obviously England lost it in the second innings, but I think that just happens sometimes in Test cricket. You have periods where the opposition are allowed to be good, and Sri Lanka were very good with the ball. Kamara's had periods in the series where when he's been able to sustain his pace, he's looked really dangerous. He gets those early 2 wickets, and Vishwa, I actually don't think bowled a very good spell because they kept criticising him for bowling 2 leg side, but he bowled 2 really good balls in that spell to get Root and Brooke out. And then from that moment, that just happens. And in the first innings, England had control of the game and they let slip of that control. And I think the most damning thing is what Sanath Jayasuriya, one of the Sri Lankan coaches, said about Harry Brooke. Basically said, we're just trying to make him be bored. Hide the ball outside off stump. And, Sanath Jayasuriya is a player who's probably had that happen to him quite a few times. And I guess from an English point of view, it was a little bit too easy for Sri Lanka to do what is quite an obvious ploy. And if you're India or Australia, you hear that, you see that, they're going to replicate that and think that they will be able to control England, because I don't think those teams will bowl as many bad balls as Sri Lanka bowled on day one. Because it is worth saying, Sri Lanka did not start this Test match very well. Katya, how do you see it? Do you think England have developed as a batting side this summer?
Yeah, I think definitely when you look at the first test of the series against Sri Lanka at Old Trafford, on that final day, they really, Root in particular and Smith, they really knuckled down and they got those runs on what were really tricky conditions. But this test had such a feeling of last day of term about it, where England just completely lost concentration. Stokes not on the field, not captaining, Pope captaining, we've scored 200 and whatever for 3 on the first day, this is going to be a walk in the park. And you said on the morning of day 2, England could easily just score 200 runs in a session here and job done, and they could have, and they didn't, and that was the issue. Brooke in particular, as you said, was guilty in that first innings. But if you look at Duckett as well, Duckett has left a lot of runs out there this summer. He's been arguably the pivotal player in the whole Bazball kind of movement of it.
And you're saying that as a compliment almost.
Yeah.
Like he's playing so well that averaging 33 across a summer like this doesn't do justice to how well he's playing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not fair to compare a lot of people to Joe Root, but if you look at Root's innings in I can't remember if it was the first century or the second century at Lords, but he waited until he got 3 figures. Having come in when England were in a potentially difficult position and he'd batted them out of trouble, he waited to bring out that reverse ramp shot that he plays until he'd already got them out of danger. Duckett had attempted about 3 reverse ramps or scoops by the time he played the one that got him out. And he was also battering them down the ground. There was no need to pull out that shot when he was scoring pretty freely without it. And it just kind of struck me as you're just trying to have a bit of fun rather than actually bat in the way that we know you can very aggressively and score those hundreds. It's overused, but people are remembered for the hundreds they score. This was meant to be a fill your boots summer, almost like stat padding summer. No disrespect, but that's what it was meant to be. And when you do that, that's how you get those averages of 50 plus in Test match cricket, and you're remembered as one of those players. And if you leave those runs out there, you're not going to finish with stats like that. Duckett probably doesn't care, but it did lose England. Well, not just him, but it did contribute to why England lost this Test match.
Yeah, and I think England have gone forward as a batting unit because they brought in Jamie Smith, who is an upgrade in that wicket-keeping position. But actually, if you go through the rest individually, like Cash just laid out for Duckett, and actually he obviously gets out players. There was one of the ramps he played where there was the guy there on the fence at fine leg and he was trying to hit it basically straight to him, it looked like, and somehow accidentally got a leading edge that then meant it went over third man. But it was like, you should be criticised for that because you definitely get criticised if you get out. So if he'd hit it well, he would have maybe got out, and he hit it badly, so he got it for 4, but that doesn't change things. And then so Crawley, well, he got some good balls. He troubled by Jaden Seals.
They only played 4 innings.
So can't really say but you can't say he's gone forward. Pope, don't know anything about him that we didn't know before this summer, and if anything, that's only got more pronounced, that kind of boom or bust nature. And Boom is right to emphasise because his overall record is still decent.
We'll get to him in part two.
Yes,
Don't worry.
Okay, fine. Root, obviously, has he gone forward? I mean,
I actually think he has.
He's gone forward since India, since the dismissal.
He's been utterly brilliant. Obviously didn't have a great test here, but I think over the course of summer, I think, Katya, what you're saying in terms of this was a summer where if you really knuckle down, there were a lot of runs out there if you're in form, and Root was in form, and he scored lots of runs.
Yeah, but then Brooke hasn't done that. We're still waiting to see if Stokes can kind of click as a batter bowler, and captain. He's yet to kind of combine all three at the same time with success. And then you're into Smith. So actually, like, England have gone forward because Root is like comfortable now being the best player in the world, and Smith has slotted in seamlessly. Those guys are actually already in the side. I think they need to be challenged. They need to start thinking like, let's make those, 450, 500, 550 totals that will actually mean that, we can win a series in Australia, because that's what they're kind of going to have to do, I think.
Before we head to Mark Butcher, who I spoke to minutes after the winning runs were scored, a reminder that although the English Test Summer is over, they have a thrilling winter to come, and with Howzat Travel, you can join the excitement. Whether you're passionate about red or white ball cricket, they have something for everyone. For Test cricket enthusiasts, the tours to Pakistan and New Zealand deliver unbeatable value, combining breathtaking scenery with thrilling cricket. If you prefer faster paced action in a winter paradise, tours of the West Indies or India offer the best ticket packages around. Howzat Travel offer a variety of ticket and travel options which allow you to make the most of your next cricket holiday. Head to howzattravel.co.uk to book your dream cricket holiday. Anyway, here's Butch. We're talking with a post-match presentation happening behind us. But let's start with a positive. Pathum Nissanka's one hell of a player. Sri Lanka's batting depth must be pretty good if he's not making your 11 at the start of a series.
Well, absolutely. You have Kamindu Mendes coming in down at number 7, who looked as good a player as there was on either side. And Nissanka just looked to have, the wonderful technique, terrific temperament, every shot in the book, almost a runnable century in a run chase. And he did it as though it was a stroll in the park. It was fabulous to watch him. And, I don't know how much Test match cricket Sri Lanka have got coming up, but for goodness sake, if his name isn't at the top of the list in the next one, I'll be very surprised.
And they were in their position of dominance because they ran through England in that third innings. When they're fit and when they get their consistency right, that's an exciting attack. Kamara bowls genuinely quite quickly. The Fernandos swing it. They have spells like that in them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they showed throughout the course of the series that not necessarily as a unit, but in individual circumstances, that all of them had attributes that could trouble batters, particularly when the ball was moving. But they just put it all together beautifully in that third innings. And also at the back end of England's, from England, 261 for 3. And then suddenly ran through England, knocked them over for 325. I have to say that England's batting on both occasions was end of term, too gung ho, slapdash, all of the bad adjectives that you could come up with really about the way that England played the sort of, from day 2 onwards in the match really. So they were aided and abetted by a team that kind of played as though the victory was a foregone conclusion and kind of went at it like that. But I think they bowled fantastic. If you think about it, Sri Lanka winning a Test match in England with a 4-man pace attack, no specialist spin bowler, is an extraordinary thing in itself. And they can all be very proud of the way that they hung in their fort and then took their moment in that third innings, knocking England over.
You said there was a casual end of term feeling to the way England batted. Some people would say that the worst moments in the McCullum regime, England have had a casualness to their batting when it's not been the end of term. Edgbaston last year, Lords last year, Wellington against New Zealand. When series are still on the line, England have had performances like that in them. What do you make of summers like Ben Duckett's or Harry Brooks, where they've looked really good? They've had good moments, but they get out in quite frustrating ways. Ben Duckett caught on the boundary, Laws caught mid-on, early second innings there. That opens the door for Sri Lanka to run through what was actually quite a fragile England lineup with Wokes at 7, Hull and Bashir as 2 number 11s, Lawrence out of nick at the other end as well.
Yeah, all of it, agree entirely with all of those things. Look, the annoying thing about it for me is that over the course of the previous 5 Test matches, England have been very, very prepared to be pragmatic and play game situations. And then, once you'd earned the right to kind of be a bit more expansive and kind of go back to Bazball 1.0, then do it then. But, the lead was only 60. The ball was moving around. And they kind of came out and played like they had 260 on the board instead. And then Sri Lanka, as we've mentioned before, bowled brilliantly. So knocking over Root and Brook with the 2 in-swingers by Vishwa, who up until this Test match, or that afternoon anyway, had looked absolutely insipid as a left-arm swing bowler. And suddenly, before you know it, you're in big trouble. And that's what's annoyed me, really. Not the fact, because we've seen them do it before, as you said, but the fact that they actually made strides to remove that sort of unnecessary risk-taking from the game in order to get the job done, get themselves into a position where they were infallible and were going to go on and win it. And I hope that that's annoyed them too.
I feel like they've made strides against West Indies, but in the Sri Lanka series, Root's brilliance papered over the cracks. England win by 200 at Lords, but Root scores 240. The run chase at Old Trafford was quite nervy at points, and it was Root and Smith actually who really knuckled down to ensure that England got over the line. How easy is it for a lineup like that, who's so talented and they've had good moments, to actually readjust when it does matter? If you're casual in Test matches like this, will it just be okay when it is a crunch game against I say a better team, but actually this is a team, Sri Lanka here, who've absolutely battered England.
Yeah, in this Test match they have. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, look, obviously Stokes not being out there on the park, not being there as a batter makes quite a big difference to the side in the ways that it shortens the batting lineup, but also his instinct, his leadership, and his skill as a number 6, makes quite a big difference. You saw that. I mean, so for example, yesterday in the field when they've been bowled out in 34 overs, they then come out with fields as though Michael Holding is bowling and the ball's reverse swinging all over. There are 5 slips and gaps all over the place, and Sri Lanka kind of had knocked off 90 before you blinked, and it just there was a naivety in all of that. The game was still there to be won, albeit they'd made it very difficult for themselves by batting so poorly in the 3rd innings. But the game was still there to be won, and it kind of was like, no, we're England, we're going to attack no matter what. And before you knew it, it was almost, the game was up before stumps last night. So, things for them to think about, things for Ollie Pope to think about as a stand-in skipper. Was I too carried away with the idea of us being sort of so superior as a team that we kind of took them a bit lightly and over-attacked and overdid things? But I'm sure and I hope that there will be a debrief that comes with this Test match loss, and a look at, okay, we cannot afford to kind of pretend that the other team isn't there and that we're just going to steamroller people.
Just on how quickly Sri Lanka scored, there'll be a lot of people listening to this who didn't watch a ball of this Test match. So look at the scorecard, look at the figures and go, oh, he's gone at 5s, he's gone at 6s, etc. How much was Sri Lanka's scoring rate down to how attacking England were in the field?
Almost entirely. Nissanka has played a brilliant innings there, but he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. The odd bad ball that came along, he knocked it away with great style and aplomb. I mean, just run a ball 100 for goodness sake. But in the first 40 or 50 runs that he made, he barely had to do a thing. There were just gaps everywhere, just pushing forward to balls. It disappeared down the ground for 4. It was, if you were going to win the game, you had to put them under some sort of scoring pressure, i.e., build dots, bowl maidens, and the fields that were set did not allow them to be able to do that, even if you bowled perfectly. So I thought it was naive at best.
And finally, the story before the Test match was Josh Hull's sensational debut. How do you think he did?
I think he did all right. Yeah, I mean, I think he was, he looked shattered after sort of a couple of the spells in the first innings, and obviously picked up what looked to be some sort of a hamstring injury going into the second. I think there's an enormous amount to work with there. He's got James Anderson there who can talk to him about having his wrist behind the ball a little bit more, which will give him a little bit of extra snap and pace and make the ball swing later. But big in swinger that got the wicket. Who was it? He got out. It was Vishwa.
Yeah.
Was fantastic.
Probably bounced out Danajaya when Danajaya and Kamindu were really well set.
Yeah. So I mean, there's an enormous amount of raw material to work with there. Fitness that'll go up another notch now that he's sort of in the England fold. some of that sort of that expertise and knowledge around sort of the ball release and all the rest of it. But I think, England have got something there, that will pay dividends in the future.
Yeah, and overall, if you had to rate England's summer out of 10?
Well, that's knocked it down a couple of points, hasn't it? I'd say 7.5.
Yeah.
I was really encouraged by some of by the way that England managed matches over the previous 5 Test matches. But I wasn't at Lord's. Obviously, I was away on a holiday at that one, so I didn't see that Test match. But up until then, I was very happy that the naturally aggressive instinct was tempered when it needed to be, in order to get in front in matches or go on and win matches. And that showed, a sign of a maturing sort of ethos, I suppose. And then you go and spoil it all by doing that yesterday. But overall, I think they've had a good summer. It was low key, I suppose, because I think everybody expected, the cricket watching public expected that England would win both series, if not all of the Test matches, and that's never a great place to start. But I think there was some impressive cricket from both of the touring teams as well. Let's not forget that. I think the West Indies at times really fought gamely and bravely, despite having very little in the way of batting resources in particular. Sri Lanka looked a very, very good team. It was maybe, a session in the Test match at Manchester that stuffed them up there. Similarly at Lord's, they were in it, and then suddenly they handed it back. And this is a nice little wake-up call for England, that you don't take the game or your opposition for granted at any time.
Well, it never stops. The Australia T20 start this week, and England's tour to Pakistan is less than a month away. Beat the ballot and secure a premium experience at the England-India Test Series in 2025 with Seat Unique, a game changer for fans looking to enjoy the ultimate match day. Seat Unique has premium tickets and hospitality packages, offering official access for all days at Headingley Edgbaston, Lord's, Emirates Old Trafford and the Kia Oval. You'll elevate your experience from the best seats in the house and enjoy luxury perks such as complimentary food, drinks, afternoon tea and guest speakers from the world of cricket included in your ticket. Buy yours now at seatunique.com. Before the collapse on day 2, Ollie Pope's doubter silencing 100 put England in a really strong position. Ben, the flip side of Pope's early struggles is that once he gets through his first 30 balls, his record is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, so I looked this up. So with the caveat that he doesn't get to 25 as often as basically any other England player. So that goes back to his recall, like his second debut at the end of 2019. He is actually up there with the best in the world once he gets past that stage. He averages about 84, I think, after getting to 25, which is, I think, in the top 10 in the world in that time, better than Brooke, better than any other England player apart from Joe Root. So that is a good thing, but also kind of makes it like it's almost like, because he knows how good he is when he gets in, that he then wants to race to get in, to fast forward through that bit, and that's what means he gets out. Whereas the flip side of that would be if you were to knuckle down for that stage, then you know that once you're in, you can dominate. So like, do work as hard as you can for that first bit and then do that. But yeah, he was really good, and like I think he also, on that kind of second morning, he kind of maybe lost a bit of rhythm. That's when he had a few lies. But I also thought that that he batted nicely on day 1 as well, and that was kind of, we say, it's classic Ollie Pope at the Oval, having seen him do that time and again for Surrey here, but also this summer he hasn't done it for Surrey, and since that Test 100 against West Indies, there was a bit of pressure, and this is an England team who don't hesitate, that they show faith to players, but they also don't hesitate to make decisions if they think there's a better option available. And this from Pope will have just reminded them, how good he can be.
We still got quite a few messages in that were quite critical of Pope, and I was trying to work out why he brings out stronger negative reactions than other English players with comparable records. And I think it's because even when he does well, he's not doing it in the way that people either initially or even recently hoped he'd do it in. So even Alex Stewart, the director of cricket, earlier this summer, basically said he should just look at Root and copy that. But his style is increasingly that of Duckett and Crawley, in that he plays his way every innings. He might adapt technically, his method might change, but his intended tempo is just really high every time, and it lacks a sort of control even in his best innings that someone like Joe Root has. And I think people still think with Pope he's someone who could do what Root does. He was a great hope. He was the guy for ages where people thought, oh, he's the one who'll take the baton after Root. And even though he's still doing really well, his record at 3 is good. There is that sort of method, I think, that people don't love, and they didn't have. That's not what they hoped he'd become, I think, a couple of years ago. Butch was relatively critical of some of the way England went about things in the field. Katya, what did you make of the call to stay on and bowl spin on the second afternoon when the umpire said England couldn't bowl pace anymore? We had that farcical moment where Chris Woakes bowled 4 balls of off spin.
Yeah, I do kind of have some sympathy with doing that, because if they'd chosen to gone off and the crowd couldn't see any cricket, they would have probably got some criticism for choosing to go off, because Ollie Pope has had that criticism earlier in the series from Owen Morgan when he chose to go off, that he should have stayed on and bowled spin. So you're kind of in a lose-lose situation. Yeah, spin probably wasn't going to be very effective, but that might have been in the back of Pope's mind that he'd been criticised for going off instead of playing spin earlier. And also England have Dan Lawrence, Joe Root, Shahid Bashir, enough spinners to bowl. I mean, the Chris Woakes thing of bowling spin was farcical, but that wasn't Pope's fault. So I don't really have an issue with the whole playing spin. And I do think he's been unfairly criticised. And I do think that if he hadn't stood in as captain for the series, I'm not sure that he would have got the same criticism he has. Like, there are fair points to make about Pope, about the starting and the conversion, and also who he scores runs against and when he scores them. But he has still scored 7 Test centuries against 7 different oppositions, which no one has ever done before. And normally when someone scores a century on their home ground in the last test of the summer in only their 3rd test of captain, just on those raw things you would be praising them. So I do think that the criticism has gone in a bit too heavy on Pope at the minute. But we'll see. There's every likelihood that Ben Stokes won't be fit for the first test against Pakistan, and that will be a much more challenging situation in which for Pope to adapt in a country that he scored runs in 2 years ago. And I think that will be a really important kind of point if it comes for Pope to kind of get past.
Ben, what did you make of Josh Hull's test debut?
Some stuff to work with, but plenty to work on, I guess. He wasn't as quick as he'd maybe been billed as, but I think there was some noises coming out from England that almost because when you pick a guy who, is massive, bowls with his left arm, and we have seen occasionally on TV hitting those high speeds of, high 80s, touching 90. They were kind of already moderating that before he started to play, and then you saw the speeds. It was mostly kind of that low 80s, really, which is kind of, that doesn't have to be a massive issue. And I think England's thinking is that he can get quicker, or that it's a rhythm thing, and that's something that you work out when you're a young bowler. In terms of, and then I think he wasn't maybe quite as all over the place as I thought he might be. I probably more expected that he would be quicker and a bit more scattergun, whereas actually there was still maybe about a 4 ball and over, or a heavy ball and over, but yeah. And then he also noticeably tired, I think, especially during that first spell. He was kept on for a 5th over, and they were saying on TV he's getting a bit slingy. He's kind of and that happens when you get a bit tired. He almost looked a bit kind of almost slightly embarrassed with the manner of his first test wicket, which was brilliantly caught by Woakes, because it came kind of off an attacking kind of drive ball, and then Woakes takes a brilliant catch. And then when he drops the catch at was it mid on off Shahid Bashir, if he was more established, the kind of thing it's embarrassing, but it's the kind of thing you kind of brush off. He looked properly like he wanted the ground to swallow him up. So it was to his credit that he bowled a bit better the next morning, but then again wasn't great in that second. So look, you only have to look at him to see the attributes he has, and there was he got a bit of swing. I would have liked to see him bowl a bit shorter for a bit more of a sustained thing. I think he was kind of maybe constantly searching for that swing, whereas actually there was the odd short ball that was okay, that because he's so tall, that's just going to bounce more. So actually you don't even need to be that quick, because you're just getting good bounce from an area that is awkward to bounce it from. So yeah, I mean, you have to manage your expectations around him. And I think there is a feeling that also England think that this is how he gets better, is by being in the team or around the team, rather than, playing for Leicestershire, I guess we'll talk about on Friday. But yeah, of all of England's debutants, he's not up there with one of those, who's had
who's
an incredible
readiest
start
for a long tour. Yeah, I think. How do I think he did? I think I was encouraged by how much he swung it. Actually, that's a way of getting people out, and he really did swing it. The wicket of Dhananjaya was really good. Sri Lanka were looking pretty comfortable. Nothing was happening. The ball was old, and he bounces them out. That's exactly what he was picked for. Pace-wise, I wasn't that surprised. And I think it was more that he struggled to maintain his best speed. And I think it's just very simple. He's not played that much red ball cricket. He will get fitter and stronger in quite a short space of time, you would hope. I'd have no issue if England took it to Pakistan, being like, we see things in there that we really like, and we want to harness the good stuff. England keep referring to every selection as a bet, and they always say they want to look at what people can do rather than what people can't do. And even though it didn't all go smoothly for him this test match, I think you could very obviously see there are some things there that are really, really exciting. And I should say, like, on how expensive he was at times. Well, Anderson went at fives when he was on debut, age 20 as well. I think the expectations, and I like that England managed expectations before he made his debut. I think we just have to be quite careful with the 20-year-old. I think they know he's not going to be going at 2.5 runs and over now. And I think that's fine. Woakes off-spin was obviously farcical. And as were, I thought, the scenes on day one where we spent most of the day off the field, even though there was barely any rain. Katya, do you think we go off the field too easily for bad light?
Yeah, but I don't really know what the solution is, because it's entirely up to the umpires on the field. There's no like ICC regulations that says, right, once the light drops below this number, that's when you have to go off. So if the umpires deem it dark enough, and they on the field did deem it dark enough, then you go off, and there's nothing really you can do about it. But day one, it wasn't that dark. I mean, everything looks darker in the Oval Press Box because there's quite a dark screen in front of it, so it does look like Armageddon's coming.
And there's more of a canopy that sort of blocks the light as well.
Exactly, so it's quite hard to judge. But if you stuck your head outside, you'd be like, why aren't we playing? And I don't mean to go in for Ben Duckett on this podcast, but I also thought the comments that he made afterwards were quite poor, in that he said that's just what you get from playing in England, and if it was Australia last year, then those quicks we would have gone off. The point being, it wasn't Australia, the attack from last year. Sri Lanka don't have a massive amount of pace in the attack, and a couple of balls before they went off, he'd whacked one through the covers for 4, so he was clearly seeing it absolutely fine. And when you're trying, it just kind of feels a bit ridiculous that when you're trying to think of new ways where we can make sure that there's enough Test cricket, and that with massive ticket prices that crowds come in for at the Oval, that you see a full days of Test cricket when you're able to. And it felt like on the first day there was enough light to play more cricket than was played. And when you're sat in the crowds and it's not raining and there's no cricket on, that's a long day.
There's a 2-hour period where it wasn't raining at all and we were off. I think the attitude is just wrong. It's almost as if that we're looking for any excuse to come off rather than doing everything we can to stay on. And I have a lot of sympathy for players here. Facing a 85-mile-per-hour bowler and the light's not amazing. I understand that. It's literally quite scary. I understand for the umpires, because they'll be the ones who get it if someone does get hurt in those conditions. I think it's more on administrators to change regulations to make play possible in those conditions. I now firmly think that in England, at least, just bring a pink ball on at that point. At that point when it gets, in the umpire's eyes, too dark for it to be safe with a red ball. I know it's not ideal, but conditions fluctuate in Test cricket all the time. It's not fair per se if you're bat first on the first day under grey skies and it's completely cloudless on day 2. I just think that's just make that part of a days of Test cricket in England, especially in September, where this is always going to be an issue. It needs to be totally clear at 6 o'clock to get a full day in September.
Well, that's the point, right? It comes back into the scheduling issue that if you're not scheduling Test cricket in August, then you're going to have to schedule some in September when the light is less than ideal. So it's kind of, what evil do you want? Do you want it in kind of what is still bordering on spring in May and then into the summer in June, or do you want more Test cricket in September? And if you've decided to block off that period of the summer for international or Test cricket, then you need to make the regulations or the rules as considerate for being able to play Test crickets they can when it is darker in September. And if you can use that pink ball, if there are other administrative decisions that can be made, rather than just saying, right, well, the schedule only allows us to play in September with the same rules, and that needs to happen, right?
Well, to be fair, this is not something we'll have to worry about next year because the last day of Test cricket is August the 4th.
Superb.
So not something we need to worry about.
I think there's also something here where we just want a bit more flexibility in general. Like it's related to some of the chat we had during the T20 World Cup. But I think that if a match referee can look at a forecast and see that it's going to, hose it down 20 innings into a T20 game, 20 overs into a T20 game, there should be flexibility there actually to say like, but through the best of our knowledge, we can get a 10 over game in here and we can't get in something longer. And okay, there might be some times there where you end up playing a bit less than you otherwise could have, but you get a game in. And then there was another example on the second day here where, and this was, I thought was properly farcical, was that they pushed lunch back at the start of the day because of the time lost to bad light yesterday. So England then lost their final wicket at 1:02 p.m. So normally that would have been, okay, that's lunchtime. So you go off, you have the change of innings in lunch, you come back after lunch. But because they'd pushed the lunch break back to 1:15 p.m., they then had to have a 10-minute break, then come back out for 3 minutes, which meant you actually lost another 2 overs when when you could have just, if you just been like, oh, okay, like fine, it's 3 minutes early than we would have had lunch otherwise, having pushed it back out at the start of the day, but let's just have lunch now. And that's fine. But no, there's like the regulations are so inflexible that they had to just lose two more overs just pointlessly.
But also start at 10:30 in September.
I completely agree.
That's going to be the best conditions for like
completely agree.
Start early.
They did do it at the championship at this time of the year. They should do it in Test cricket. Rob asks, the summer tests were boring in the sense that there were very few periods of tension. Is that an inevitable outcome of modern Test players have a go rather than grind it out mentality, Ben?
I think I challenge it to an extent. I was quite engaged during that first Sri Lanka England test. I thought it was quite tense actually when
it's quite a low bar though. Engaged for one of the test matches.
And I was also quite engaged during the second England West Indies test actually when when West Indies got a first innings lead. I thought that was a very entertaining passage when they stretched up to that lead in the last wicket. And actually at the start of that innings, I was thinking like, if things go right here, they can make a fist of this, and then that doesn't end up quite happening. But that game was still alive until. But so I guess his point is more like wanting to see, and I guess that it does come down to what is entertainment as well. That like actually 2 overs of blocking in challenging conditions can be very entertaining, and that is something that England no longer want to do so much. But then they sort of did do that in the last innings in that first Sri Lanka test. So. I think this was always going to be a summer that felt a bit weird because par for England actually, like England, you could argue it's still an under par result this summer, 5 wins and 1 defeat. And so given that England were expected to win all 6 games, it was going to be hard to see where that, like you either get tension, which means that England have, been disappointing, or you get England play to their potential and then, brush these teams aside. So I guess it's partly to do with the scheduling this summer. I don't know if it's necessarily wider to do with Test cricket, and I think even given that there have been some interesting tests and test matches.
I was thinking this, and I think that I wonder if how quickly England move in a test match makes you almost not realise there's tension. So like here, when England were ahead, it didn't really feel like there was that much tension because of the way England were playing, and Sri Lanka didn't bowl very well. But the speed of their collapse, the game went from England being quite a long way ahead to being miles behind really, really quickly. It was actually, you feel tension when you're not sure who's ahead. And there wasn't really a period where that was the case. And I think the other part of it is the relative unknownness of the visitors. So this was Sri Lanka's first tour here in 8 years. And even though they've got this top 7 who all average 40, only Matthews, Chandimal and Karunaratne have come here before. So Dan Jaya, who's their captain, averages 40 in Test cricket, played 65, 70 Test matches for Sri Lanka, never played in England. So even, someone like Nissanka, who elements of the English media are talking about as if he's this new guy, he's been around for 4 years in international cricket. He's been a prominent figure at multiple World Cups. I think the unknownness of the Sri Lankans played a part in perhaps the occasion not being as big as it could have been. Ross asks, just sitting watching Dan Lawrence get out again, I can't help but think England have wasted an opportunity to look at another opener. Who should England look at if Lawrence doesn't get the gig in Pakistan?
Well, you could look at Alex Lees. Alex Lees has obviously was part of that first kind of, was it the 2022 summer that he was a part of, and then he's got dropped, scored a lot of runs for Durham in Div 2 last year. Hasn't done quite as well in Div 1, but it's still scored a lot of runs. I think that the Dan Lawrence thing speaks wider to that England prioritise the player over the position. So Lawrence has never opened before. You think about Pope had never batted number 3 before he came in. Chris Wokes batted 7, not a 7. Atkinson hasn't really batted 8 in the championship. And Lawrence has been trailing around for the last couple of years or year and a half as a spare bat, and they saw an opportunity and got him in. Maybe they would have been better to wait for Pakistan, where he could have come in as almost a spin bowling all-rounder in the middle order or something like that. But it was almost a free pass. Like you've never opened before, have a go at it. If you make a success of it, great. If you don't, you're probably still going to go to Pakistan because you're the type of player we want in Pakistan.
Yeah. I felt really sorry for him. He looked so sad when he was walking off. You could tell how much this opportunity meant to him. That is everything for today's show. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Katya. And thank you, listeners. And a reminder, we will be back later in this week with a bonus episode to catch up with everything else in cricket and to answer more of your many very good questions that we had sent in this week. See you later.